So Lumion is okay. Okay, I have no issues with it, right? I don't use it, but for example, a few of you have used SketchUp to just show pictures and stuff, and that's fine. But like if I know that you've modeled in SketchUp, it's like this little thing in my head where it's like, I hate SketchUp so much. It just hurts. So with these images, I don't actually know Lumion, but if you were to just crop these images a bit, it no longer looks like a student's made it, yeah? Like, the thing is, this is better than what some professional people can produce in terms of rendering output in a short period of time, but that makes it look like a student's made it. Okay? So I don't never want to see that ever. Okay? If you're working on and everyone does it. Everyone who's given me Lumion, no one's ever actually gone through and hidden that stuff except, okay. When I say that, I mean there's so many people that have done it over a long, I've had it last year, I've had it the year before, I have it from my third year students, I have it from my second year students. So I'm not just talking about you. You guys are like 2% of the bigger group. Now, there's some important things here that I imagine a lot of you might bring up, and that is, that's not necessarily a nice shot anymore. We've cropped the trees out. And this is where being good at Photoshop is actually very necessary. Yeah? So, how do we get rid of Lumion? Yeah, there's a few tools in Photoshop that are worth getting your head around. Everyone here's probably used Photoshop, right? Like, you know, you're making dank memes in high school, right? Everyone? Those days. I can just imagine it's super big in Europe, right? Making dank memes. Yeah. Everyone's making them? Yeah? Okay. It'll catch on here eventually. So, there's a few ways that I would go about doing this, and I don't necessarily have the Lumion file to produce this, but all you would have to do potentially is move the camera a bit, take another screenshot, another render image, and then we've then got some, effectively whatever that was in there, we now have without that stamp on it. But we can pretend, now I've chosen a really hard one, because trees are hard. Lisa, do you use Lumion? Sorry? Do you use Lumion? Yeah. When you've submitted Lumion images, do you bother to get rid of this little thing up here? No. Bad. Don't ever do it again. Cool, no, it's okay. I've said this to the whole class, by the way. I'm not just singling you out. So, there is airbrushing, which is this little guy here. It's the stamp tool, clone stamp tool. And with that, if you hold Alt and you click somewhere into the scene, so for example, what's really important, we can kind of read this, see that timber line that is designed in? It's kind of it's the ceiling and then it's turning up into an upturn for that facade. We need to kind of make sure that follows through. So if we click Alt, click onto that section, we can see how that line's continuing through, and then we can slowly airbrush that in. Now with airbrushing, clone stamping, you can kind of find that you have to do it in segments, and then you can run through again, because then you're clamping what's been already clamped. So we're getting a bit of repetition there, but we can fix that up later. The key thing here is we just want to make sure that that line follows through.
If you're really worried about that composition, why don't you just make the original image widen out to a little bit?
Can you do that? I don't know. I'm assuming Lumion is limited by your screen space, isn't it? You can widen the lens? In that case, just widen the lens, and yeah, if you can do that, then I would do that, because going through and sort of touching this stuff up the way I'm doing right now is quite time consuming, versus widening the lens and then cropping is the best solution in my opinion. But it's just one of those things. I feel like remember how I talked through how to sort of draw a box and extrude walls and put a ceiling on it? A lot of people, and I don't mean everyone, a lot of people gave me buildings that were extruded boxes next to each other, and that's it. There was no doors, there was no windows. Like, you can't just rely on everything that I say to you in class, because if there's no door, how do you get in? And if there's no window, like, if you had to do work and live in uni, work in uni and in a non-windowed environment, how would you feel? Like, I know today's not a good example, but how, like, is it actually a place that you would want to live? No? So, just because I haven't spoken about it doesn't mean it shouldn't be put in, okay? And hence why, like, in this case, I feel like we do sort of have to go over the fact that when Julia and I have to mark your assignments, there is this point where we say, is the design and presentation of a professional quality? Now, in this case, this isn't going to affect anything to do with second assignment's mark, because the second assignment wasn't really about submitting this stuff. So this is just extra, hence why it's okay to criticize it quite openly. But for this next assignment, if I see this, it doesn't look professional. Like, I can't put this in front of a client. Yeah? Okay, I don't need to cover that anymore. So, second thing, and Baptiste is now on the firing line, and you have to consider that fortunately he actually went out of his way to do this. I've recognised that a lot of you aren't very good at sketching or drawing, and it's a thing that is worth getting good at. Okay, some of you are really good at drawing actually, so it's one of the first computational design groups where I've actually seen some people expressing that. But this, it's kind of along those lines of like the professionalism side of things. Like, would you put this in front of a client? Now, it's communicating well, but it's not polished, yeah? And I'll even throw this question to Baptiste. Do you think you're good at drawing? No. So you know that you're not good at drawing, right? But are you good at potentially using Illustrator or Photoshop to get the same results? It'd be a what? A track? Yeah. Shall we do it? Yeah. Okay. And the other thing is, I know this is inception. Like, I know this is before you actually made your model. But I don't really know that, okay? So when you present things to me, I don't know what came first. And this is where sort of what I consider is like one of the bad things about architecture is this smoke and mirrors effect, whereby, what's a good example? I have a design, I've worked on a design, I'm just going to make this up, this isn't necessarily true, but let's say I'm an architect and I've worked really well with this particular material and I'm used to working with that material, and that material is rammed earth, okay? So what that means is they put a mold down, they fill the mold with earth, it's usually like, in Australia, we'll use like a nice irony type of dirt and put a bit of water in it, like mud, and then a machine comes along and squishes it down and compacts it. So it becomes quite solid. Okay, so I've got a relationship with that material. I've used that material a lot, right? Then I have a job, I have a competition in the United States, in Washington, to design the Australian Embassy, which is just down the road from the White House. And I come up with a design and I plan on using this rammed earth, right? But then afterwards I realize, there's this kind of relationship between, like, my building has a color, which is like this terracotta, and there's this like history in Australia of the use of that with Aboriginal painting and ochre, and like the actual land is literally has that identity. Let's say that we actually chose to use this material because we're making the ochre house as kind of like a tongue-in-cheek joke at the White House, right? Really bad joke, right? But it's post-rationalized, yeah? So we've realized that there's a connection there, and then we're almost saying, yeah, we actually did this with that intention, okay? So even though we can see here that Baptiste has intended, he did come very close to what he actually drew, although it was more refined, like the drawing's not refined, that there's nothing stopping you from using your final design to help you create these drawings, okay? So, but a key thing here is, I'm going to actually download this, put it into Illustrator, and we'll clean it up, okay? Is this something that you would like to see or not? Yep. And we'll be going into the tutorial, like I'm going to talk about making sections and plans. We're going to draw a section and plan in Illustrator. Cool. Thanks for doing this, Baptiste, by the way. It's good. It was a good point. I didn't have to go look for something on the internet. Thank you. Okay, so we want this in Illustrator. Let's just bring that in. Hey, look at my faces. I'm a nerd. Pardon? Good at drawing? Yeah, I used to be. I've gotten worse. You have to keep up. You have to keep at it. If you like, I used to sing as well. My range used to be quite large, and then like I stopped, and now like I can hardly hit all the notes that I used to be able to hit. You just need to keep at things. Like I used to be good at Adobe Flash, and I stopped using that. And now if I tried to pick it up, I'd be like, "Durr." Does anyone here play an instrument of any kind or used to? And have you sort of stopped? You keep at it, but you've noticed that like progression's slowed down a bit. Yeah, or it's harder to do certain things. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to use a layer in Illustrator. We're going to draw on top of that. Sometimes when I'm tracing things in Illustrator, I like to grab that thing and make it transparent just so that it's not as strong. Okay? And the key thing here is that we don't have to, like we can take multiple shots at this thing, right? Like you draw a sketch, you pretty much have to start it from scratch again if something's gone wrong. So, and this is kind of where you can use your skills in computation to help you. So, for example, this hairy facade, it eventually becomes pipes, but this hairy facade takes actually a lot of effort to make it look good. Yeah? Like I get the picture, but does it look good? Hello, Julia. So I've rarely see anyone do a good job with the pen tool in the first go.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I mean, like, why don't you just vectorize it using the image transport?
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Why not?
Because it's like this. It's like when we want to work with an image, right, and actually edit the image, or you could think of this as anything. If you want to edit a file, like a design, if I had a beam, right, like so, and I've drawn it this way, like I've actually drawn it. Something funny?
No.
Okay. Is it something to do with my beam?
No.
Okay, good. If I draw a beam like this, right, it's just an image of a beam. It's like, I forget the philosopher, but like, is this a pipe? Like, is it a pipe? Or I'll draw it again. Is this a pipe? Is it?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Why not?
It's an image of a pipe. Yeah? But the key thing here is, this is just an image of a beam, yeah? So if I were to like take a photo of this, put it into Illustrator and trace it, I would get, these wouldn't come out as lines, yeah? Like it's the same as if I were to draw this, there's 4 lines there. Take a photo, trace, like use the image trace in Illustrator. Illustrator doesn't turn these into lines, right? It turns them into fills with like an edge. So if I were to try and grab this and move it up, it wouldn't do that, yeah? But it's not understood as a line, right? I couldn't grab the line and say, give it a thickness. It doesn't work like a line, yeah? And this is where the thing is, Batiste didn't necessarily need to actually go through and draw these lines. We can actually generate them with Grasshopper, yeah? I know he's capable of doing it because he did it in his actual 3D model. So I'll just quickly do this. But what I meant to say before Alan interrupted, rightly so, that's fine, is that whenever you're tracing these things, you rarely get it right the right time. Like there's just not enough tools in that repertoire to make sure that everything's perfect. So it's fine to actually go through afterwards and edit this thing so that it is how you want it to look. So there's it's hard to sort of go through this without making some assumptions. How many people have used Illustrator to the point where what you're seeing me do is boring? Like you know how to do it? No. Okay, well, tracing something in Illustrator, it's as simple as that, right? There are various tools and you can go through, you can grab handles, you can edit them, etc., etc. You guys, though, you are getting good at what program's probably your best drawing program at the moment? No, listen to what I'm saying. What is your best drawing program? Drawing doesn't necessarily mean pixels. Do you feel like you're good at Rhino at the moment or not? Would it be easier for you to trace this in Rhino or in Illustrator? Really? For you? You think so? Bit of both? Actually, I'm going to trace it in Rhino. Huh? You think so? To trace things?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh? Okay. So the thing is, you've all got different opinions about that, right? So Rhino have you actually traced anything in Rhino? Ever? Never? Okay, you will be doing this a lot. Everyone will be doing this a lot. Because actually going and getting a director drawing something up on a plan, and you have to basically match that in the digital world, in real space, you're going to be doing it in Rhino? Huh? Of course you would be. So in Rhino, there's this thing called picture frame. If you type it, you select the picture, it lets you draw the picture, right? It comes in as a surface, so it's rotatable, it's scalable, and most important thing is if you go into its properties, into its material, we can set its transparency to be low, so that way it's easier to trace, in my opinion. It's up to you. And it sits on a layer. So in this case, it's on the default layer, and I'm going to lock that so that like I can't click and edit it. Cool? So now I'm just going to go through and do the exact same thing I did in Illustrator. Batiste, I want to put like a little kink up here. I just feel like it needs that. Or the thing is, do you see this outline that you've drawn? Do you actually need that? Or were you just using that to guide your lines?
I guess that was my initial thoughts on what it was going to look like. So you'd be able to sort of see that shape.
Yeah, but once, like you could actually, if you just had the lines, would that be something that helps communicate that better?
Yeah.
Do you guys kind of understand what I mean? So like this, what a traditional drawer would do is they'd draw this guide down on a piece of paper, then they'd put trace paper on top and go through and draw the lines, and then they would take the guidelines out from underneath, and they'd have all the the sort of like these hairlines in place, yeah? So the key thing here is if I hide that line work now, do you see how we've got like this, it's just something about, it's like this refined shape, yeah? There's something about it that, like, unless you've got really good control with your hands, you have to be very skilled with a pen to be able to produce something hand-drawn that just comes even close to like this refined element, yeah? In no way is this even close to what, you know, some hand drawings can become, and this requires more effort, but if I were to present that as a diagram now, it feels like someone with some skill has submitted it instead of someone who still needs a lot of work with their hand drawing. Yeah? Cool? Those of you who know how to draw, you know that you know how to draw well. And those of you who can't, practice, but I wouldn't submit those things like at a presentation level. Definitely to sit down with us and talk over it, perfect. But to present, you need to put a bit of effort into it, make it look professional. Should we make this hairy, or yeah, shall we? Shall I talk about my process of moving stuff from Rhino to Illustrator? Okay, let's make it a bit hairy. And see the stacked tubes, stacked wind tubes? Like, I would be struggling to keep a job if I did that, okay? Like, it needs to look clean and well thought out, yeah? So as if you care about this more than I care about it. Because you probably do. You do care about what your mark more than I probably do about your mark. So you need to sort of show that. So even just, sorry, Baptiste, I feel like I'm picking on you, but just stacked wind tubes, like in a nice font. Century Gothic's a nice font in bold. There's just, it feels curated and loved.
With assignment 3, do you think I should do something like this, or should I do something like get an equipment plane of like the actual thing?
I think the thing is, you have to talk people through the story. Please do not forget about the presentation board, right? All a presentation is with screen is just sequential presentation boards, okay? So, how do you tell your story? In Baptiste's case, this would be one of his diagrams, so that we actually know what we're about to see, so that when these tubes come up later, we know what they are, okay? We know why they're there. You might even talk about like staked wind tubes, like why are there stacked wind tubes there? So what's your idea? Now, all of you've had a go at putting that down to 300 words, but you could probably read those 300 words out over your 5 minutes, and it'll take 5 minutes, okay? So how do you compress that into 1 or 2 slides with 1 sentence, okay? So for example, trying to just think. Shelter, what's one of your core ideas in relation to Akira?
The organic part of
Right. So that's pretty simple to get across, right? Like in terms of having an actual image that ties that to the idea, the word, the thing that you're trying to achieve. And the thing is, I know your design enough to know that that's relative to it, right? So later when I see that design, we can see, oh, that is actually, she's achieved what she set out to achieve. But you're not actually, like some people might actually discover that halfway through or maybe even like a week before things are due. And this doesn't have to be the thing that you originally thought of. Designs change and you usually produce these things last. Would you agree?
Post-rationalizing concepts?
Yes?
Never done before.
You've never post-rationalized? Never? So that speaks a lot of words to us because we know what you mean when you say organic. Nick can also say organic, yeah? And he is doing things that are somewhat organic, but they're very different organic to what you're talking about, yeah? So pictures, they talk a lot. And like even though that was a silhouette, that's perfect. That's a perfect thing to put up. Now, how that relates on the site, you don't even have, like your design doesn't even have to be perfect in terms of a diagram of how you actually take something that's organic and you place that on the site. This is a diagram, it's not the plan, but with the names of the spaces and arrows through showing connections, that communicates a lot to us. And doing that by hand, if you're really good with your pen, that's fine. But it just takes too long. Especially, I've extended it by 1 week.
Okay.
Cool? So you don't have much time, and we need to start sort of seeing these types of drawings appear. Cool? I keep digressing. Let's go back to where was it? Sorry, I was on a certain track. We need you to introduce concepts to us. We need to see some precedents. Do you remember talking about precedents? I don't mean 90% of the presentation is going to be precedents. I mean 1 slide of precedents. And in that 1 slide, if you can somehow relate that to 1 or 2 pictures from your movie, that's enough, okay? If you go anywhere beyond that, it looks like you're filling the thing up, okay? You've only got 5 minutes to present. You got to get all your ideas, your design across in 5 minutes, yeah? Concepts, some designs, precedents, and then how does the design actually result from bringing all of these things together? What does the plan actually look like? And the section. Did you see where I'm getting at there? So just don't forget that linear progression through, because there's an aspect to the storytelling that we need to focus on. You need to get good at that. It's important. Okay, I'm going to correct my staked wind tubes. And I'm going to try and code as quickly as possible. This isn't going to be something that I expect you guys to follow along. I'm just going to randomly put in some points and just put some arcs on them just to demonstrate. Oops. Changing my mind. Fastest way to do this. So the key thing here is we're working it up so that we can edit it. Like having just a static image is the last thing we want because like we want to be able to work with these things. Now I know it was pointing the other way, right? They sort of go up, don't they? Yeah, okay. Do we reckon that's good enough, Baptiste? You happy with that? You know, it needs a bit of refinement, but close enough, yeah. Okay, so important thing here is that a lot of architects, a lot of designers, the people that you will potentially be working for, they have come from a time and a place where the thickness of your pen is important. Okay, so thick line is made with a pen that has a different thickness, and you'll note if you actually go buy pen sets, they have different thicknesses. I know a lot of you'll sit down and you'll sketch something out like what Baptiste has done with just one pen, but an architect will have maybe 4 sitting next to them if they were to do that by hand. Okay? And you remember I said that is important? Yeah? That applies with all these diagrams, all these drawings like this. This could eventually become an elevation. Fat is important. So if I were to import, let's say I'm actually going to bring both these two, set the outline and the hairlines into Illustrator. The easiest way for me to do that is to have them on separate layers. And this is where you'll see that in programs like AutoCAD, that people are actually setting their drawings out not based on how the building should be modelled. So you won't have a layer for rooms. You'll have a layer defined for walls, and that wall layer will have a very certain line, like very specific line thickness. And if you have another wall layer that's for concrete walls might have a thicker line thickness because they're actually, like, they're not going anywhere, that type of wall, right? So structure and whatnot might appear thicker in some drawings. And that's why when we bake, it's important to bake onto separate layers. And we're going to go through that a little bit more in the tutorial when we do a section. But here, we're just going to make sure that I'm going to have the purple layer selected when I bake these, and I'm going to move the tubes onto a blue layer. We'll select all of that, export selected, and I'll just send that to my downloads. And the really important thing with Illustrator is you can actually output Illustrator files from Rhino. So there we go. It's going to ask us a few things about scale. So you can see here it's saying whether or not we want to export things to a certain scale. It's going to be important for you to do that with plans and sections to export to scale, but for a diagram like this, doesn't necessarily matter, okay? So I'm going to select snapshot of current view, hit OK, then in my Illustrator file, I'm just going to open this from scratch. I get all my lines. Now this is nowhere near looking good enough for me to submit. We need to start doing that finessing in Illustrator. I have some ways of producing stunning drawings out of Rhino and Grasshopper that are openable in Illustrator. It uses a method called SVG. There is also another method called EPS, and it is basically coded file drawing. So you know how you've got a HTML drawing, a HTML page, and you can make that page look good even though there's code in the background? You can do that with drawings as well. Cool? But I just want you to know that that's there, but we're not going to go over it because it's like a semester's work of actually learning it. It's difficult, but just know that even though this process here is manual, there are automatic ways of doing it. Okay, so as you can see, layer 3, layer 2, layer 1, they all come in, right? So it's very easy for me to go through and isolate the things that I want to work on. So we're going to make these hairs black, and we're going to repeat this it's the end of the class. We're going to have to do this upstairs. I'm going to make these black just really quickly. But the key thing here, now I know that Batiste isn't making these hairs, but I feel like I want to make them hairs in my design, like my version of Batiste's. So we can actually start applying styles to this thing that give it a different feel to it. Like if these were tubes that Batiste, like he did actually do tubes, then we can select these and thicken them up, give them that tube look to them. Does that make sense? If anything, this lecture's just trying to encourage you guys to put some more effort into how you present your drawings. Upstairs, we're going to do a section and a plan, okay? So instead of screenshotting sections and plans, we're going to illustrate them.
Have you got time for a question? Or upstairs?
Pardon?
Is it time for a question?
Yes. Oh, we can do it upstairs.
Okay. I just want to get the silhouette.
Yeah.
out of Rhino.
Yeah, we can cover that.
Okay.
I've already shown you guys how to make a section in Rhino already, haven't I? So that way is not always the best way of doing sections, I think. It's actually a manual process of typing clipping plane and drawing the clipping plane in, and you still have to sort of like screenshot the thing to get it into Illustrator, right? So what we're going to do is just talk about using human to do some more complicated things. You still can't get human, right? Great, okay. But everyone else can use human? Yeah? Yep, okay, cool. So, can you get elephant? Can you go check if you can get elephant? Did everyone download elephant as well as human? Yeah, we'll use elephant just for Romany's sake if it works. So the important thing here is when you use these programs, these plugins like Elephant and Human, there are ways to bring information into Grasshopper from Rhino. So we remember how we were pulling information in, like we pulled the walls in and did things to them to allow us to script in a almost like BIM-like fashion. So we can do that exact same thing when it comes to baking. So we can set up baking in Grasshopper so that it's automated in a way. So I'm not going to do that with these pipes. More so, we're going to set up a section in Grasshopper. Fuck's sake. There we go. Okay. So, if you just think about what a section is, what is a function in Grasshopper that could create a section? Pardon? Exactly. That's exactly it, right? That's how you can start to automate a section in Grasshopper. I'm just going to quickly also move the landscape into ground. So we're going to pull our geometry in. The geometry is on separate layers, and we're going to use. Can you use elephant?
I can use human, but not elephant.
Oh, okay. Let's use human then. Okay. So with human, we can get a dynamic geometry pipeline, and we're going to type into that all the layers that I've used. Feel free to make a quick file, most of you should have a file. The key thing here is we want to bake everything. So grab everything from your script that's baked, and we want that to be baked into separate layers. So for example, I've got default, I'm going to change to building. Pipes, I've got ceiling and ground, right? So I'm going to call building, pipes, ceiling, ground. Make that multi-line, grab those layers, and we're going to just tell this thing to grab all types of geometry. At the moment. So we can see that's pulled that in. Now, if I just hide all my geometry that's baked and we draw a line, we'll create a new layer called section. I'm going to draw a line in that layer. Import that line. and we're going to create a plane from that line. So to do that, I've just got a quick little process that, I've turned that into a cluster at work, but the simple factor to that is just get the endpoints of a line, turn those endpoints into a vector, get a z vector, a unit z, and we're going to construct a plane from one of the endpoints using the vector and the z vector. That's a section plane now, so if I move that we can see that plane shifts. You do the same thing? Similar? You might use, there's 100 different ways to make the plane. Yep. And then with that, but sometimes, you want to be able to control, which way the lines and, stuff like that. So there's our plane. We're going to use intersect brep plane. Now this is going to be, if you've got meshes in your file, that this won't work, and you're going to have to do that with meshes, and we're going to have to separate that out. And maybe we'll talk about that after I finish the first part. We'll turn the landscape into a mesh, and we'll work with that. But if I just hide everything now, we can see that's the cutting plane that goes through the building. It feels like that's missing. And that's because I've spelt ceiling wrong. Cool. So if I move that into an appropriate spot, I get a clear cut through that. Yeah? So the annoying thing is if I were to bake this normally, so if I were to select this, hit spacebar or middle click and just bake, it's baking all these lines into the same layer. And we don't want that. We want to be able to control the line thicknesses. Like for example, we want to be able to control the ground line, which is there. That we want that to be thicker than our walls. And this ceiling might be made of glass, let's say, and that needs to have like a different line thickness in our section. So how do we eventually bake this thing so that we can control which way these objects are going? And this is where human helps. So human has a bake geometry component, which works it uses that same list structure system as every other component, and we can control the attributes of our objects as they're getting baked. So here are our objects coming out of our dynamic geometry pipeline, and what we're going to do is we're going to find out what properties they have. So by using object properties, we can see, and I'll just make this list flat because it doesn't necessarily have to be branched at the moment. We can see exactly which layer these objects came from. So items 0 to 3 are on the building layer. Items 4 to, because there's so many pipes, are on their respective layer. We've got ceiling, and somewhere in there there's probably the ground. I can't see it. Show. I'll move that to the ground. At the bottom there's the ground, right? So when these items get sectioned, usually what happens is, do you remember, even though we've got a flat list coming into our brep plane, what's the output of the curves? What data structure is coming out? Can you guys see? What's the data structure? Come on, guys. It's what?
It's in order.
Yeah, but is it flat or is it not flat? Is it flat? It's flat going in, right? Is it flat coming out? No. What? And how can you tell that it's not flat? Because the way that you've answered that feels like you're not confident about your answer.
I guess it's the way that the numbers are presented. So it's like
So is there branches? Can you see branches?
I don't know.
You don't know? Do you remember what we call branch? Is this a branch?
Yes.
Okay, so can you see branches?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how do you think the component produces the branches? If we were to have two objects like this, and we cut a section through that. Like so. So you can see that the section. How many branches do you think there will be?
Like I guess it would be classified by per object.
Yes? Perfect. Right? So we've got 202 objects going into our intersections, and we have 202, so 201 plus 0 is 2, like plus 1 is 202. We have 202 branches coming out, right? So the branches relate to the objects going in. So is there a possibility that an object could produce more than one object after an intersection? And do we have objects that do that? In my case, do I have an object that does that? It's very obvious. Do I have an object that produces more than one object after it's intersected?
Yes.
And why do you reckon that's so? I can see what?
The branches.
No, it has nothing to do with the branches. It has to do with the content inside the branches. So, branch 6, how many items is in branch 6? 2. That means the intersection for that object has produced 2 objects. Yeah? Now, in the case of these 2 shapes here, is there a possibility that the torus could produce more than one intersection curve? Yes. Okay. Come on, guys. Is that making sense? Okay. So what that means is we've got a list of where these objects, where their layers are on per object. But if I were to count the number of layers that I have here so I have 197 and 197 objects, but I've only got 47 curves, right? And some of my branches have more than one object in it. Like if every object was being intersected and some of them were also producing more than one curve, I'd be getting more than 97 curves at the end. The key thing here is if I were to graft my layers like so, I now have a branch that each layer relates to each object in their groups as they get sectioned. Does that make sense? So group 6 is a pipe. And then here, group 1 group 1 is a building, branch 1 is a building, so every curve in branch 01 here is produced by the building layer. And so when we assign those properties, remember how if we have a list that's longer than another list, what happens to everything beyond the two short lists? Like what happens to if you have 2 items in one and 3 in another, what happens to the third one? Right, so if I had in list 1, if I have building as item 1, and in branch 1 I have polyline and polyline, if I were to apply building to that list, what would the first polyline have as a property? Building. Just use the right words. And then what would the second one have? Building. Right. Okay. Is this making sense? Okay. So we're going to construct a new layer for these to be baked onto. We're going to call this like a section layer. And to construct layers, we have to use a system like so, where you have the name of a layer, and if you want to have a sub-layer to that name, you have to put 2 colons. So we're going to say bake, and then I'm going to put in, I'm going to type less than replace greater than, like as a little tag, and we're going to use that to replace with our base names. So for example, I'm going to use replace text. We're going to, with replace text, replace, and we're going to replace that with the name of our layer. So what that will do is produce bake and under bake building, and then bake, and then subset of that is pipes. Cool? So just to demonstrate what that actually does, if I go to edit layers now, and we use create set on a flat list, so these are all the unique layers that we need to actually bake to. There's a component in human called create modify layers, and if we are then to right click that and set that to useful paths, because see how I put the little double dot here? If I don't turn useful paths on, then it doesn't know that it's sub-nesting them. So instead, it'll create a layer called bake double dot building. We don't want that. We want it to be nested. So turn layer full path on and plug that in, and you'll see it creates those layers for us. I know it was quite quick. Did everyone see that? Who missed it? Come closer. The tables have wheels, like, move in, please. Do you grab this table and is it because there's a power board over there? Is that why? Okay. Do you see those layers there? Through here? Those were created by Grasshopper. I don't know why this has started to freeze. Ah, the beauty of technology. I'll show you. Hang on.
Is it bringing in all the layers from like originally, or all one tab in the section?
It's all the one. It's basically it's just giving us all the layers of the objects that we pulled in. So the key thing is not just to get them as a list. We need to know each object's layer, so we know where to bake that layer to. Now this is absolutely fucked. And I don't know why. Come on. I don't want to write this again. Okay. So we're going to grab human, we're going to get the object properties. There they are, so we flatten that. And because that's there,
Oh shit, we need a card because one friend should use to take on force.
okay guys, so just to sort of prove that layer thing again, we've got here create modify layer. Now we need to just remember to right click that and set useful paths, otherwise our double dash won't be understood as a nest. Like that net, you know, you can nest layers. So then plugging that in, we can, now just everyone really pay attention to the left. We get those layers getting baked, created in. Yeah? Okay, cool. I feel like that's the thing that's freezing. It is the thing that freezes. Yeah. Delete that. Okay. But either way, we need the layers to be there, or otherwise it won't work. I feel like it got through bake, pipe, ceiling. It didn't get ground. Just make sure ground's shown. Change object. Okay. So the thing is, we only need that to create the layers. As long as the layers are there, it should work. For each graft, for each branch, there's a layer to be baked to. So with human, if we select the create attributes component, and into that we plug that layer, remembering that if we need to right click that to make that full paths, and then it won't be errored. Then what that means is we've got an attribute that will then go into humans baked geometry. See how that it's got attributes there? So there are attribute objects that get applied to the object that gets baked, and that controls the layer that it gets baked to. So as these come out of our section and they go into our geometry, we just then need to set that to true with a little toggle button or a little button. So now instead of having to right click or spacebar radial select bake, we can do that with this button here. So if I hit bake now, and I just quit out of Grasshopper and go to our bake layer, we can see that these objects have been baked. And if I just change the building layer to red, we can see that everything that was on that building layer in our file is now baked to the building bake layer. Does that make sense? Now, this doesn't have to just apply with doing sections. This can apply with everything. Like, a lot of you are modeling different elements in Grasshopper, and then you're baking them into Rhino. And I suspect that you have to go through manually baking them to different layers, or after you've baked them, you'll go through and select those objects and move them to the different layers. You can set up a human attribute to bake those things to a specific layer every time. You just have to hit that button and it distributes it to the right layers. That should be helpful to everyone here. Yes? Okay. Cool. So there's just one issue if I were to try and start getting this into Illustrator, and that is that it's 3D. I need this to be flat for Illustrator to understand it. Can anyone give me a suggestion as to how to do that? Make 2D. Alan, you just lost 10% on your third assignment. It was a joke? Can anyone give me a suggestion?
I need to just like do it from the frontal right.
Pardon?
Frontal right. I need to make it like these lines.
Okay, can you articulate that a sec? Just try rephrase that. What does frontal right mean?
The view, right?
Can I change the view? Is that what you're saying?
These like go into the front view.
Change front view, but it's not like if I go to front view. See how this will be at an angle in front view.
Was it right there?
No, well it's not aligned to right or front. Like if I look at that from front, it's going to be squished. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like front view and right view aren't always where elevations should be taken from.
Oriented on an XY plane.
I could do that. That's exactly what I should be doing, I think. So everyone's familiar with Orient now. They should, or like everyone should be familiar with Orient. I think I've covered it for everyone. No, not quite. Okay. So, didn't I draw a piece of paper and like move the paper around and? Okay. So we have a plane that is cutting that section, right? The plane's cutting the section. What do we need to do in Orient? What are the 3 ingredients that make an Orient? Geometry, the plane of what? Be more specific. The origin plane, and then the destination plane. Yeah? So what's our origin plane? We've already got one. What's our origin plane? This one, the one that's cutting the section. And we're going to use XY plane as the destination, and we can basically run this geometry through Orient before we bake it. So I'm going to select everything under the bake layer, delete that, and rebake it. That didn't seem to have done. That's because I put it into attributes. Rebake it, and there's our section. It's already 2D. No, he said use make 2D. But we don't need it, right? So we've now got what's required to start moving that into Illustrator, I think. Okay, to do a base elevation section. The hard thing to do through automation is elevations. If you can work out how to automate an elevation, I'll be impressed. Okay, so usually you'll find, Julia, have you ever automated an elevation? Like without Revit? It's difficult.
It's difficult and it doesn't work necessarily with those geometries.
Yeah.
But it was, we had it because we wanted to and make to the other match that we can only do.
Right.
And we could save it some parties. But we had a lot of overlap to
Well, we're gonna do something. I'm gonna do something that you were asking about as part of this process, but we'll do it after we've moved this into Illustrator. Okay? So I'm gonna select everything in my layers. I'm gonna go export selected, and we're gonna send that to an Illustrator file. I'm gonna call that section, and the thing here is I've drawn my model in meters. Now you may have drawn it in millimeters, and we're gonna bring that into Illustrator, which is designed to think about paper space. Okay, so and we need to do that in top view, not perspective view. So, who here, apart from the architects, are familiar with scales? Anyone? Scale? So if I were to say 1 to 100, what does that mean to you? Right. So have you been working in like 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 2,000 with Rob? No scale? Okay, so if Illustrator is thinking really about page size things, and we need to take a building that is, in your case, I think it was like 30 meters maybe in one direction, what would be a good scale to bring that down? And the key thing here is, if you pick a scale that is like 105.39256, I'm not going to be happy, okay? And other architects are not going to be happy, because there are people out there with rulers that have very defined scales on them so that they can go up to these drawings and measure them. Yeah? Now, yeah, so I realize that this is a digital presentation, but you still need to migrate this to Illustrator, right? And Illustrator still wants to think about things in page size. So it is still worth doing stuff to scale. But yes, you're right. On a visual presentation, on a screen, what other ways do we have to convey scale, accurate scale? Can anyone think of one? Yeah. I'm going back to Google Maps. Do they actually have? Oh, there it is. Can anyone see here the 200 meters in the bottom right hand corner? That's Google's way of saying, okay, there's your digital scale. Okay, so it's worth drawing up one of these Google scale bars. You'll find scale bars. You know how to use that to draw. If you draw a scale bar the way that Google represents it in their images, scale bar. There's all the typical scale bars in the world. If you draw anything similar to that, no one's going to question it whether or not it is a scale bar, right? You don't have to think outside the box when it comes to designing a scale bar.
Baroque scale bars and drawings. Simple scale bars are usually better. And do you you receive a lot of drawings with the north sign and the scale versus like paintings from?
No.
I've received it.
Okay, either way. So if I was going from 1 to 100 in a millimeters file, then I would type 100 to 1 in our export, okay? But I've drawn my file in meters. So can someone do some quick mathematics in their head to work out what that scale would be from meters to millimeters? 100 to 1. Go. It's Australia. We're using metric system. Should be really quick. Huh?
You had 1 meter equal.
Pardon?
Was the thing so it was like 1 meter equals 1 meter itself.
What? Say that again. 1 equals 100.
No, it's like what's the thing?
We want to have a 1 to 100 drawing,
Yeah.
but I've drawn my model in meters.
Okay.
So what would the scale be?
10 millimeters.
We want in meters, point what to what? Because see how it's got in meters 100 to 1? That means 100,000 to 1, right? So if we want that to be 100 to 1, what do we do? Anyone? Perfect. What's 0.1 times 1,000? What's 0.1 times 1,000? 100. So it's 100 to 1. You guys are really going to have to get your minds working with numbers soon, because next semester we're going to be doing some structural engineering foundation stuff, which means thinking about converting newtons to kilonewtons. So how many, just based on its name, 1,000 newtons is how many kilonewtons? Okay, right. Got to start getting your head to move between millimeters, meters, square millimeters. How many square millimeters in a meter squared? How many square millimeters in a meter squared? Anyone? It's 1,000,000. Just remember. Do you know why it's 1,000,000? Why it would be 1,000,000? Think about it, Lachlan. Yeah. Okay, I hit OK. We go to Illustrator. And because we've worked in layers, everything's set up for us right. Okay? It's really easy to go through and select things and change them based on the fact that it's layers. There's your stuff, Batiste. Let's quit out of that. Quit out of that. You get something else? Okay, so when we pull stuff out of Rhino, it doesn't actually we don't get to specify the page size. It doesn't actually give us that option. So we have to work with that in Illustrator. So we'll go Document Setup, Edit Artboards. That lets you change the artboard for what we're working on. Let's just work to A3, make it landscape, and when we move it, you see how my geometry moves as I move the artboard? That's because I've got this setting on here called Move Copy Artwork with Artboard. If we turn that off, that means I can move that around without affecting it. Okay. What should our thickest line be? We've got 4 layers. What should our thickest line be? You reckon?
Well, I mean, the thinnest one would be the windows and
Right. Say that louder. And more importantly, so that everyone can hear. The ground. Right. The ground should be the thickest. If it's not the thickest, it's going to feel like it's something that you've built into this, right? If there is no ground line, your building, according to me and Julia, is flying around in space. Yeah. Either way, your line should be, your ground should be the thickest. Now, a lot of you have probably, if you have Illustrator open right now, you'll note that it probably defaults to 1 pt. I honestly don't know the conversion rate between pt and millimeters, but I know when I buy pens, they're in mils. Okay, so those Artline, you know the Artline pens, like what are the 2 most common thicknesses that you would probably purchase? 0.2 and 0.4. Okay, if you're working with technical pencils, it's important to know this because if we get line thicknesses that are huge, just everyone's actually the pen thicknesses are actually designed for us to do these types of drawings, so it's worth working to those pen thicknesses. Okay, so technical pencils come in 0.3, 0.5, and 0.7, and 2 mil. Okay, but how do we write that in points? Fortunately, we can go to Edit, Preferences, Units, and we can change our stroke to millimeters. And then if I were to go through, select the ground, let's make that 2 mil, 1 mil, 1. 2 mil is pretty thick. Yeah, 2. Huh? Yeah. 2 mil. Our ceiling, which is going to be a giant glass window, we'll make that 0.1. Our pipes, I'm going to make that 0.2. And our walls, I'm going to make that 0.4. And we're going to set that to black. Black. And we're just going to turn that fill off. There we go. And like quite quickly, I have what I would consider to be a clean section. It's just missing a few things. William, what could this be missing? A person? Perfect. That's one thing. Good thing I'm hearing that. It's missing people. It's missing depth. Okay, those are probably the 2 most important things. And there's just one more thing, and I think it's more relative to what you guys are doing as an assignment than anything. What is this missing? Move away from technical. What is it missing? Trees. Okay, yes, it is missing trees, but let's say my design doesn't have trees. Think about it. It's missing atmosphere. And you can get atmosphere with trees and materials and lighting and stuff like that, right? Like, this is close to what we're getting to when we would give this to a builder to build off of. But we're trying to use this section to communicate something, like we're trying to communicate the design, not how to build it, yeah? So, for example, Lachlan, if this was your design, this is missing the play of dark and light, I would feel, right? Or Chris, if this was your design, it's missing all that vegetation that you put through it. just imagine how that would look if you were to start like populating this with all that atmosphere that you're putting into your perspectives through an actual section. Like I can go through and hit people with stuff. I would suggest, Romany, that you would even avoid using line thicknesses for this type of drawing and just do everything in shades of grey. Just to sort of play around with that sort of minimalistic white environment that you'll play. Like the black almost hurts that effect, yeah? Like, does anyone want me to hit their particular design up with suggestion and giving this thing atmosphere? I believe that for your particular design, all the detail that you're putting into your actual surfaces needs to come into this. And I think that we're going to cover that when it comes to dealing with like depth. So, for example, right now when I look at this, does it look like there's a whole bunch of pipes covering our building? What does it look like? It looks like someone's gone mental with confetti or something, right? Yeah, confetti. Yeah? So this is where like elevation is important with sections. And I mean, a key thing here is this section could eventually become a perspective or just a pure section. What do you want to do? What would you prefer? Perspective? Okay, let's do it. So, this is going to change a few things. I'll still get to your point with people. I'll just show you guys how I do people sometimes. It involves doing silhouettes. I like getting a silhouette of an object. So, I'll turn off my layer. I'll go back to my 3D. In Lumion, can you guys create sections? Yes? Can you make an orthographic image? So can you do isometric views? So Grasshopper is going to be very difficult to get when it comes to giving you an actual elevation or a perspective view, unless you use like Make 2D, but that's not always perfect, right? I usually like, if I'm going to start putting in the perspective in the background of these sections, I usually take it into a rendering package. So I'll use V-Ray with 3ds Max, but if Lumion is capable of doing orthographic views, can someone check that for me, please? It can't? Well, it can at least do sections, right? So what I've done is I've drawn a clipping plane through my building at the section line, and that's now giving me that view through. And all I have to do is set my camera up to be aligned to that clipping plane. And there's a few ways of doing it, and the way that I'm used to doing it is typing C-plane, selecting 3-point. I think I've already covered this, and picking the 3 points of our clipping plane, typing plan. So that then gives us an orthographic elevation through that section. And all we have to do to change that back to perspective is go to properties, set projection to perspective, and we should now have a perspective view through that. Now one of the most important things to do here though, is that if you rotate after setting that to parallel, then the camera is going to move away from that plane of the section. So no matter what I do right now, as I zoom or pan, the actual section doesn't change in size. But if I were to rotate, it distorts away from that. So just make sure once you do that, don't rotate. And then we just need to set up where we want that perspective to be taken from. So I'm thinking maybe something like that. Hide that. Is this something that you can do in Lumion? Can you align the camera to the section?
Not really, I don't think so.
So I'm just going to change this to rendered view, just so that it gives me a few elements that I'm going to turn off shadows. I'm also going to turn off curves and clipping planes. I almost don't want these black lines, and I've forgotten how to get rid of them. I think if you select the clipping plane, there are options for that. Oh, sorry, there's options in the display. So if we go display properties, no, my bad. If we click in this top right hand corner, go to display options, and in the display of rendered, there are these things. There's other settings and objects, and I believe somewhere in here, it's been a while since I've used the clipping plane. There should be rules. Here we go. Clipping plane objects, show fills, show edges, shade the selected plane. I'm just going to turn them all off in rendered, so that way I'm just getting the shadows. We do want to fill it though, I think. Display options, go back to rendered, and we go show fills. There we go. And I'm going to capture this view to file. Okay, so we're going to type view capture to file. Just before I do that, we're just going to set the background to white. If you want the background to be transparent, shall we make it transparent? Yeah, like if we put a sky in, we need to make it transparent. The old version of Rhino, so when I say old, Rhino 5, you can't capture screenshots with transparency in the background. So one of the easiest ways to do that is pick a color that is not in your elevation at all, like red. We'll use that as our background. We go type view capture to file. We'll save that to downloads. I'll call that section.jpg. Open up Photoshop. There's a new feature. Rhino 6 came out with a feature that said, really? I don't think the background's transparent. Even though it's a PNG, it's not transparent. Go try it. Prove me wrong, please. If you can prove me wrong, that's good. That means actually we don't have to do this. So, oh geez, I have to turn the grid off as well. Okay, turn the grid off, and also remember, you get this little axis down in the bottom. Don't forget about that. So if you type grid, you can turn that off by clicking show grid axis. Show world axis. That hides that. Okay, now we can go view capture to file. So this is just one way of producing that background. Use a renderer, use whatever. I just don't have any rendering software on this laptop. Did it work? It did work. Okay. View capture to file. If I set that to PNG. Ah, brilliant. Pardon? Okay. So in that case, we can then go into our Illustrator file, place that into the background. And because this is the right side, the lined up, that will line up. So there's a trick involved in lining stuff up that isn't the right, like it's bigger than what you have to guide it. And that is if you were to draw a zone, so we know, like we have a snap down here, like we know where that is down there, and we know where the top left-hand corner of our box is. So if we draw a box across that, select our image, and then turn on clipping mask, and go make, that will mask that image down to the box, which then allows us to place the box at our relative points and then scale that quite easily to the right size. And then we just have to, once we're done, we go clipping mask, release, and then we can delete that original, the box that we drew there. And we've now got a background to our section. Okay? And this is an image that you should be photoshopping and editing or rendering to make it look right for you. Okay? Because this is not appropriate for any of your designs, I don't think. Like, there's no one here that's got a building style that should be represented with Rhino white, this Rhino render effect. Like, personally, if I was stuck using this, I would add some transparency to it just so that it doesn't dominate the section. Is it going to zoom out? Does that make sense? Like, that's pretty, to be honest, if I'd learnt how to make sections this quickly, I'd be pretty happy at the moment. Because this took me a long time to work out. Would you have spent a lot of effort on sections before, like trying to draw these things manually? Yeah. Right. Is that making sense? We can see how everything lines up. Like all of our pipelines, they line up. I've actually got a section here that's explaining stuff. I've got to get people into my section now. Okay? Now, this is usually where I fail in this particular class. I always forget to bring some people in. Always forget. So, have I even done this? Have I tried looking for 3D people with you guys yet? I have. Let's try one more time. Huh? The problem when you start looking for people silhouettes, some person has gone and like when you're looking for the free ones, someone's gone and like traced all these like not safe for work images. It's like when you're trying to find these people, you want to find like some normal people, and they always hidden in there somewhere is like a stripper, or like you can tell they're in a pose that's just inappropriate. But okay, so there's two ways that we can do this. We can go download some people silhouette vectors. That are free. Are these free? Otherwise, we can. Let's. Oh, please be free. Samples are good. You can download. You mean posable? you can download posable models, but usually they need to be posed in software like 3ds Max or like the aptly named Poser. But it's really annoying to actually pose people. It's usually better to get something that's posable and then also download motion tracking. Like you can download motion track animations. So that's how they end up animating, like motion tracking someone walking, and then they can apply that to a bone structure. I'm going to download this. So I find it an issue when you look at a section, especially ones that are big, like a big building, and you just see the same person over and over and over and over and over again. Like, it just irks me. And the thing is, it's not like it won't affect your mark. It just irks me. So I've come up with a way where if you get a 3D model of a person and you put it in Grasshopper, you can rotate it like 10 times. So 36 degrees, 36 degrees, 36 degrees. And then you can capture its silhouette and use that. So from one 3D person, you can get 10 silhouettes that look different. So you can then spread them through the building without actually having to, source 10 separate 3D people. And in this process, I can show you how to do silhouettes. Yeah, so this process will help you. I'll show you how to do it with people, but you should be able to apply it to anything. Yeah? Has it downloaded? Are you serious? It's not one of these websites where you just click it and it pretends that it's... There we go. Low poly people. In this case, I'm going to start a new Rhino file because we're actually, like, we can use this thing for any project from now on, right? Like, people are useful for everything, unless we're designing a cat house, dog house. I don't know. Okay, we're going to bring in our DWG OBJ thing that was here. Just change that setting. So there's our person. They've only given us one, but we're going to grab her. Looks like a she. Huh? You can't see? What's going on? There we go. So what's quite cool, I wish it wouldn't do this. Okay, thank you. What's quite cool is we can use a mesh to create a silhouette. It's the only way that you can make silhouettes in Photoshop Grasshopper, unless you start making these really complicated systems that work out how to do like B-rep silhouettes. But fortunately, we can turn every surface and B-rep into a mesh. It's a very easy process of going to a mesh. So if we had I'll just do a B-rep as well next to her. yeah, so if you have a B-rep, you basically have to turn that into a mesh for that to work, for this process to work. But I'll just work with the person at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set her to rotate 360 degrees 10 times. So we're going to set a domain that goes from 0 to 360, and it's going to rotate 10 times. And what if I get 0 and 360 from this? Am I going to get two of the same object? So we just need to get rid of the first or last one. So that gives us 0 to 324. That goes into angle. We set that to degrees, and I get some like horrific like sculpture, right? Like we can read faces in it. Okay. What's interesting here though is for each object that has a different rotation in regards to a plane. So we can pick any plane. So we'll use XZ plane, and we're going to create under mesh a mesh shadow. So our mesh goes into that, and it's a slow process. Our plane is going to be the XZ plane. And if we're going to project onto the XZ plane, what vector do we want to use? Imagine the grey board behind Julia is the XZ plane. See the grey board? So the vertical part is Z and the horizontal part is X. If we were to choose a vector to project a shadow of Julia onto that board, which vector would we want? Perfect. Or are you trying to ask why I'm asking the question? Why vector? So with that we get a shadow of every rotation, right? So all I have to do now is generate a location along the side. So we want to count the number of points that we've made. We're going to step that up with a series. Count, step up. Let's say every one. That looks about right. There. And we're going to move these and we get, sorry, we're going to probably have to group these first before we move them. And we get a silhouette of that person. Cool. So from one 3D model, we can get 10, 9, however many silhouettes. And like, you know, I see this person standing somewhere in the section, and I see this person. I'm not going to think that's the same person, right? Well, it's especially like I'll do a section of a stadium, and you'll start putting people through it. After a while, you're like, everyone's the same, and it's important that you think about who you're marketing to as well. So if you were to start putting people in a design in Malaysia, and you've got a library of people, and they're all, you've just gone outside and you've taken photos of people and you just start putting them in. Those people could be wearing jackets. They're mostly, like in Australia, they're mostly, Caucasian and mixed. It's very unlikely that you'll get a lot of photos of Islamic people. So you've got a photo of in Malaysia, and everyone looks like they're ready for it to get a little bit cold when it's a tropical environment. All the women aren't wearing headscarves. Like, there's an effect that people bring to that image. Yeah? So it's just like whenever you see those Saudi renders, like of buildings in Saudi Arabia with a stadium. If I were to design a stadium in Saudi Arabia, women aren't even allowed into that stadium. So if I were to put a woman in the render, it just doesn't look right. So you just think about how the building's being used as well, long term. Do you get these issues, Julia?
We have to send every single time. We have to send renders back because it looks like they're using up the clones.
It looks like what?
Clones invaded. They're everywhere. There are clones.
Clones of the same person? Yeah.
Like, can you please don't have so many tweets in a render?
So, yet again, for us to get this into Illustrator, we have to orient this back to the 2D plane, the XY plane. So, there's our geometry, our base plane is A, and our destination plane is XY. I'm going to bake this, and there's a few things that I'm going to show you in Illustrator. So if I just export this now. Another thing, this is something that I sort of covered with Penny earlier. When you take a render in your building, you want that, unless that render is going to be something very dramatic, like for example, as if like a photographer was to get in the bottom corner of the room and take a photo making the room look big, or if we were to do sort of like a view from the top down, at what height would our render be taken at? If we wanted to make it look normal, as if I were to just walk in a room, pull a camera out and take it, what height would we render that at? The camera. Huh? About 1.5 meters? Yeah. Let's go 10. Let's go 100 millimeters up. So 1.6. That's the average. I'm above average. Okay. So we want the eye height to be about 1.6. It's just a big general industry rule of thumb. Okay. Maybe if you're in Asia, some parts of Asia, you might make it a little bit lower, but it's generally 1.6. Have I upset all the Asians?
Yeah.
Why? You guys will live longer. Seriously. The taller you are, the less life expectancy. Yeah. Because your heart has to work harder. Yeah. No. That's like long term. It's you'll find that tall people, statistically, doing cardio, same as short people, will have a shorter life expectancy. Either way, back to this. So if I have, where's my eye? My eyes are probably around here, right? If we're putting people in our render, and or our sections, and those people are the wrong scale, then that's going to make your building look either too big or too small. So Penny, as an example, had a person in her Rhino model. How tall is that person? 2 meters. So it's 2 meters tall. So that person, as they walk through a door, would probably be worried about hitting their head. Okay? So basketballer height. Now, there are people that exist that high, but unless we are actually designing like a basketball court, we want to put regular people in, right? Just the average. You work to the average. Extremes, people are used to, measuring based on the average. You're almost 2 meters, right? Not even? But where are you guys going?
We have
An assignment due? So,
we're going shopping.
Penny, Danielle, and Alan are leaving. Penny, Danielle, and Alan, and Lisa. Goodbye. So if that should be around 1.6, roughly. We'll assume women and men are the same height. What scale of drawing have I drawn? Can you read the bottom? It says 1.566. So is this in millimeters or meters? No, ignore the actual file. Should the file be millimeters or should it be meters?
Should it be millimeters?
Pardon?
Should it be millimeters?
Right now it says 1.6 mm, which means I've got a little person, like they're this big, right? So it should be meters, right? Do you know what's really fortunate about this? Because it is to scale, the eye height's perfect. Because it's an actual, like they've modelled a person that's the right size, and the eye height is 1.6. So it kind of works. So we'll just change that to meters. And we don't scale the model. Then we're going to select these fine young women, export them as women. Select Illustrator, save as. We want to preserve the model scale. Can anyone remember the scale that I used in meters before? Good job, Lachlan. You redeemed yourself. Cool. We go back to Illustrator. Let's open them in a separate file. Now, a lot of people have issues with donuts. So if I wanted to turn this woman now that she's been imported into a silhouette, see how there's two curves there? So if I fill that with red, just to demonstrate, see how the hole doesn't actually sit in there? So now this is a bit of an art. If you go to Pathfinder, with these with all the curves that you need selected, and you click Outline, and then you click Compound Path, Make. That will then give you a shape that's based off those curves. Pardon? Which is probably exactly what I just... It's probably what I just did.
But I don't know how.
You don't know the names of those particular things. So what you need to do is outline everything with Pathfinder outline, and then object, compound path, make. Is it Control M, Control 8?
Control M and then plus or minus.
Right. Okay. Well, there's 100 different ways to skin a cat, right?
Can't see what is it.
Yeah. So she is to scale. So if I copy and paste her into my drawing, I get a nice to scale person. And I'll do the same with this one. I don't actually have to do anything because there's no donut. And there she goes. And let's just, shrink her a little bit. And we'll grow her a little bit. Just tiny, tiny little amounts. That's all that's needed. and we've got ourselves a treeless section, but it's got some scale to it. We've got control over how it looks. I can go in now and use that same technique I used to make the women with our walls. So I can select the two curves that make one room. We go outline, object, compound path, make, and then I can fill that with black. Cool? Okay. Now, I guess the last thing's trees, right? You had an issue with trees? Like you don't like placing trees in files? Okay. Well, you can do this. You can put trees in Illustrator. If you just go grab like a tree elevation. To be honest, with a drawing like this, it's probably better to go for a more like a non-realistic looking tree. Like this one looks like someone's photoshopped it to or they may have even like hand drawn it. Yeah, they've hand drawn it with Photoshop. But like a tree like that is okay. The thing is, I feel for this particular section it's good, but I would discourage using color if everything else is black and white. You're going to have to start going through and putting materials in, and we can talk about that maybe next week in terms of if you're not rendering, how do you start putting materials on a 2D section like this. But if I just quickly copy that, we'll just cheat. Okay, no, we're not going to cheat. Save that. That's a PNG, so that will have alpha to it. So then if I place that in, we get our trees. Let's make this one big. And if I cut them and place them on a layer behind our image, then we can kind of get that to sort of disappear behind our tree. Our building. No, not necessarily. Trees are a bit like, when you see the same person, it gets a bit annoying, but trees are okay. Scaling trees up and down a little bit usually helps. Also, reflecting them, so transform, reflect, vertical, flips them. But as well, the thing is, if you've got your render and that's got trees in it, it's best to just keep that there. Like, it's actually quite hard. Right now, I've got this image in Illustrator of the background, and I actually want this tree to sit behind that. And I would actually probably have to go into Photoshop and do that instead of do that in Illustrator. Does that make sense? Or like I can cut these out of the image, out of this layer, paste them into my my background layer. Come on, you're going to paste. There we go. And instead of playing with the opacity of the whole thing, we can play with the opacity of these three images as a group. So if we group them, we can then go into that group And what's going on here? So if I select in this group, if I select this tree and send that to the back now, come on. Did it not group? So you can feel how that tree kind of sits behind the building now? And that way, when we select the whole thing, when we make the background transparent, we're not making the building transparent, we're also making the trees, like fading them out. Yeah? But that, like, is that satisfactory first year work already? It doesn't have atmosphere. It's not hard to start putting shadows in. Like if you...
It's enough for getting.
Just enough. Like putting some atmosphere in, like if I just go along Lachlan's particular route, like going through and putting black boxes in and giving them some transparency. And let's say there's like a little light in this top corner. Like Lachlan's got a spotlight in his cinema designer. Imagine you've got spotlight in your new one. But going through and then sort of working out where this light is going to project to and cutting that out of the black, you can start getting these atmospheric effects to the design. So, for example, if we imagine this as an actual skylight, then you might end up with like a black, a bit of shadow in there from the sun. Let's make that. And we're getting a very different atmosphere between those two rooms just by playing around with the shadow. And if you start, if your building is going to be very dark, like very, very dark, then your people should be white. Or blue or red or whatever. Like just you're crafting a story here for us to understand the design. I'm happy with that. Can you see the difference between this and taking a screenshot from Rhino? Just a straight screenshot? It doesn't take that much effort, but the effort in actually putting some character and some line weights to your building is just so important. It just changes everything. My attitude towards how much work you've done, it absolutely changes. Okay, like I'm starting to feel like you've put effort in because you have. I can see it.